Good morning, everyone. Today I want to show you about my analysis from the short story of Little Red Riding Hood. First, we have plot analysis. In plot analysis, we have exposition. The exposition of the story starts when there was a dear little girl called Little Red Riding Hood, ordered by her mom to take a piece of cake and a bottle of wine to her grandmother until she met a wolf on her way to her grandmother. Then we have rising action. Rising action starts when the wolf have a plan to eat Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother, also to distract Little Red Riding Hood from getting to her grandmother's house, until the wolf arrived first to the grandmother's house and devour her. After that, the wolf disguised as the grandmother's and wait for the Little Red Riding Hood to come. The climax starts when Little Red Riding Hood arrives at grandmother's house just to find out that the wolf disguised as her grandmother and Little Red Riding Hood was devoured by the wolf too, until the wolf falls asleep and snores very loudly. The following action starts when there was a huntsman who passing the house and attracted by the snoring sound from the wolf inside the house, until Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother saved. The wolf fell dead and all three were delighted. The nomen or the resolution of the story is when the Little Red Riding Hood was again taking cakes to the old grandmother and met another wolf, but she was on her guard and went straight to the grandmother's house. Different first from the beginning of the story when she was distracted by the wolf. This time she went straight to the grandmother's house until the wolf was outsmarted by the Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother, and he was drowned. After that, no one ever did anything to harm her again. Then after plot analysis, we have point of view. The story is using the third person point of view, omniscient. That means the author knows a lot of thoughts of the characters in the story. The author knows the huntsman thought when he heard a very loud snoring from inside the grandmother's house. From the story, we have the huntsman was just passing the house and talked to himself how the old woman is snoring. Talk to himself means he was talking inside of his head, but the author know what exactly what the huntsman thought. Then the author know what Little Red Riding Hood thought when she saw pretty flowers. From the story, we have pretty flowers growing everywhere. She thought, suppose I take grandmother a fresh nosegay. She thought, suppose I take grandmother a fresh nosegay. The author know what the Little Red Riding Hood thought when she saw a pretty flower, and she thought to take some of the pretty flower for her grandmother. The author know what the wolf thought to himself when he saw Little Red Riding Hood. From the story, we have the wolf thought to himself, what a tender young creature, what a nice plump mouthful. She will be better to eat than the old woman. I must act craftily so as to catch both. Just like when the huntsman talked to himself, the wolf talked to himself too, which means he's talking inside of his head. But the author know what the wolf thought. Then After point of view, we have character analysis. In the story, we have Little Red Riding Hood, who the major character protagonist, and have a round and dynamic characterization. Why round? Because she showing a some bravery from the first of the story, from the beginning of the story. When she was met a wolf, that she was not at all afraid of him. And then when she was saved from inside of inside of the inside the belly of the wolf, she was so frightened and cried. And then she showed a delighted happy when she saw the wolf fell dead. Dynamic because she so changes from the start the story, that from the start of the story she got distracted by the wolf, but at the end of the story she was on her guard when she met another wolf, that she was not distracted easily. Then we have the wolf. Flat static, major characters, antagonists. Flat because he is just showing pure evil to only eat. Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother. Static because his true objective throughout the story is only to eat Little Red Riding Hood and the grandmother. That means he shows any change at all. Major characters because the wolf helped the progress of the story. Antagonist because he wants to eat Little Red Riding Hood and the grandmother. Flat static, major characters, protagonist. Flat static. She doesn't show much of character development. Static because she doesn't show any change at all. Major characters because she was helping the progress of the story and appear on the conflict as well as the wolf and Little Red Riding Hood. The huntsman, round static, major character, protagonist. Round static because he was round because he showed a worry and care for the old woman when he was attracted by the sound of the snoring wolf to check the old woman. Then he felt delight as well when the wolf was felt dead. Static because just like the grandmother and the wolf, he doesn't show any change at all. Major characters because he was appear on the conflict and help the Little Red Riding Hood and the wolf. And also he was protagonist because he helped the progress of the story. Little Red Riding Hood mother. Flat static, minor characters, protagonist. Flat static because she was just only appear in the beginning of the story. That's why she was a minor character. And why she was a minor character? Because she doesn't have any part that was that helped the Little Red Riding Hood in the conflict. But she was the reason why Little Red Riding Hood went to her grandmother's house. That is why she was a protagonist character. The Grey Bird Wolf, flat static minor characters, antagonist. Flat static because just like the first wolf in the story, he was true intention only to eat Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother. Minor characters because she was just appeared on the last part of the story. Antagonist because just like the first wolf. Okay, next we have the setting. The setting, first the story. It is not stated in the story, but from the conversation between Little Red Riding Hood and her mother, we can expect that the conversation takes place in at Little Red Riding Hood house. Then we have woods. Woods is the mostly where the story takes place. The grandmother's house is where the conflict happened. From the story can we can expect that the story takes place in the past, perhaps around 18, according to the story was written in a village near the woods. Next, we have symbol. In the story, we have two symbols in this story. First, wolf, who represents the devil or evil mischievous. Why? Because the wolf wants to eat Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother. That is very evil. Woods. And then we have woods, symbolize two things. Firstly, it symbolizes our distraction in various ways and temptation in life. We often get distracted by these things in the journey of our life and thus end up failing to reach our destination. That's what the Little Red Riding Hood do when she was distracted by the wolf. Secondly, it symbolized the beautiful aspects of this life and what distracted the Little Red Riding Hood was the pretty flowers. That is the beautiful aspect of this life. Then we have themes. The theme of the story is don't ever get distracted from your goals and be careful when you're talking to strangers. Just like what the Little Red Riding Hood doing, distracted by the wolf and talking to strangers. That in the story is the wolf. And we have literary elements. First we have foreshadowing. In the story it's stated from the Little Red Riding Hood saying that set out before it gets hot, and when you are going, walk nicely and quietly and do not run off the path, or you may fall and break the bottle, and then your grandmother will get nothing. Foreshadowing is when an author mentions or hints at something that will happen later in the story. And when you are going, walk nicely and quietly and do not run off the path. It is the hint for what will happen later in the story. And you know what exactly happened next is the Little Red Riding Hood run off the path. Then we have personification. Something that is not human is given human characteristics. From the story, it stated that Little Red Riding Hood raised her eyes, and when she saw the sunbeams dancing here and there through the trees, the sunbeams dancing, it was not imaginable, but that's why it was given human characteristics. Then we have imagery. First, visual images. From the story we have, and then the still after her and before her in the darkness. Darkness evoked our visual sense. Then we have sense of smell, and he sniffed. Sniff evoked our sense of smell, our nose. Last, my opinions about the whole story. Well, I'm agree with the story or what the author wants to convey or deliver through the story, that people often distract in various ways to reach the goals. Me myself often distracted by my own desire to watch a YouTube video rather than to finish my unfinished assignments. So the story is relevant and realistic to our life, even my own life actually. Okay, I think that's all for me today. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and see you maybe